Attention, everyone, please. Can we get everybody in our seats so we can begin our next session here? Thank you. It's my privilege this afternoon to introduce Sean Riley. We all know him as the CIO for the state, but I want to give you a little background on his journey to how he got here today. Sean was born to a broken and abusive home. Sean overcame the challenges of his youth and adopted a growth mindset. We can make the world a better place attitude. At the age of 16, he started a technology company. Later in his career, he entered into the private sector and worked as a thought leader for companies like IBM and the Mayo Clinic. His career has included massive change and transformation initiatives spanning multi-billion-dollar organizations. In 2017, Sean was appointed by Governor Doug Burgum to lead the State of North Dakota's Technology Services Division as the Chief Information Officer. He is always looking to connect with others who have a "we can change the world" attitude as he strives to be a servant leader, improve lives, empower people, and inspire success. Please welcome Sean Riley.
Thanks, sir. I love the music. It's awesome. So, I look around the room and I see this kind of big spot here, so I'm going to kind of shift back and forth. But if anybody wants to move in, you're welcome to move in. All right, so let me frame a challenge for you. In the private sector, if you do business with Walmart and Walmart loses your data, what do? Say, I'm done. I'm going to go to Target, right? If Target loses your data, what do? You say, I'm going to Amazon, right? You go to the next one. You say, bah, I get to choose. I get to make that decision. What happens when government loses your data? When the state that holds your driver's license holds your data and they lose it, what do? Yeah, basically you put your face in your hands and you cry a lot and go, ah, right? That's about the only options that you get. There's not really a whole lot that you can do about it. And the reality is that government has a different responsibility with your data than the private sector does. We force you, quite literally, at the point of a gun, to give up your information. What happens if you say, I don't want to give up my data, I'm going to go driving with no driver's license? What happens, right? An officer comes, picks you up, arrests you, and puts you in prison because you have made the decision you don't want to share data. We have a fundamental moral responsibility that is considerably, immensely different than the private sectors. So, from a disruptive response, how many of you think of government as a disruptive innovator? Nobody? Oh. All right, well, I have to say I'm not entirely surprised about that, right? You don't typically think of government as an innovator. You don't typically think of government as that major change agent. But in this particular case, the state of North Dakota has said we absolutely will be a major innovator in the form of cyber, right? We absolutely must ensure that the data of our citizens is safe and secure. Again, we have a different responsibility than a typical company has because you don't get a choice in whether or not you work with us. We force that compliance, thus we must keep that information safe. So from a solution standpoint, how many of you guys have seen me talk about this previously? A couple of folks, right? Only a couple. So I'm going to get into a three-tiered solution here. And the solution in today's world isn't a gadget, right? all respect to all my technology partners in here, the solution isn't purely technology. Technology is absolutely one of the components, but it is not the only component by any means. The solution needs to come in a much, much different way. We start with a vision. And for those of you who have seen me speak before, right, I love the Mars slide, right? How many Minnesota people do we have in here? 1 or 2 Minnesota people, right? So my big gag, and I do this because I'm from Minnesota too, my big gag is we're building a rocket ship here in North Dakota. We're going to go land on Mars. We're going to go look back at Minnesota, go, nah, we got there first, right? All right. The reality is that we had to have a huge vision and say, what are we going to do? So what do we want to be able to have for a vision? We want to have comprehensive data security across the state of North Dakota government. Whole of government cybersecurity. We want to also make sure that every single person in the state has the opportunity of being cyber educated. So what does that lead to? It leads to 3 buckets: a strategy, operations, and workforce. From a strategy standpoint, I mentioned this before, 7 branches of government, right? We were all taught in 3rd grade that there's 3 branches of government. Officially, that's true. But the reality is when you get into things, there's a little bit more than that. The reality is that we've got our traditional branches of government: executive, legislative, judicial. We also have higher ed. We also have K-12. We also have cities and counties. How many cities are there in North Dakota? And I'm using the term cities liberally. Let's count all the big guys and the smaller guys. Give me a number, anybody? Yeah, it's about 300, right? So it's about 300 different communities that we have. What happens in every single one of those communities? They have data that they get from you, from people who live there. They hold that information. And with that information, they have to defend it. What is the average salary of a cybersecurity professional today in America? What was that? 80,000. It's actually 116. So we got some really good guessers on this side. They're really close, right? $116,000 a year is the average cybersecurity professional. And if you've got 300 different communities and they have to hire their own individually, all of a sudden the cost of your government skyrockets. What's that do to your taxes? What's that do to your property taxes, your sales tax, your income tax, right? They're not wasting money. They're trying to use money to defend you, but how much money are they spending? Let's think about this again. K-12s. We've got over 180 school districts in this state. What if every single school district also has to hire a cybersecurity professional to defend their data? How many places do you know that you go to, they only have 1 person? Most of the time it takes at least 2, right? Somebody's got to go on vacation sooner or later. Hopefully they do, right? So now we're talking 300 cities. We're talking 180 school districts. We've got 53 counties, and we've got 11 universities, and we've got the 3 traditional branches of government. How many cybersecurity people are we talking about? Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. What is the unemployment rate in cyber in America today? 0. How many jobs are open nationally right now? It's 480,000 open today, 2.1 million that are projected to be open in the cyber field over the next 2.5 years. What is the likelihood that you're going to be able to get hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cybersecurity professionals to come to little town XYZ in the state of North Dakota? Not to mention, every other state in the union has the same problem. Whole of government strategy is absolutely necessary. 1, we have to contain the cost. 2, there isn't enough workforce, period, to be able to do what we need to do. And 3, we want to absolutely ensure that how we are defending is a uniform approach so that we ensure defense. From an operations standpoint, we have to secure, we have to defend, and we have to respond. right? We want to be able to defend ourselves initially against the attackers. We have to secure the systems in a multi-tiered approach, and we have to be able to respond when we fail, right? So here at the state of North Dakota, our front door attacks, our active front door attacks are 5.7 million per month, right? What happens if we defend 99.9999 of those? Then we've been breached 11 times since I've been standing here. That's the kind of volume that we're dealing with, right? That's the kind of volume that we're dealing with in just, quote unquote, little North Dakota. So we have to have an operational model that really thinks differently. And then from a workforce standpoint, how many of you heard the stories of these two girls here? I'm deciding whether I'm going to tell the story or not based on the room, right? There's a half a dozen people in here who have heard the story. So we might go into that. So let me talk to the strategy a little more. Again, 3 traditional branches of government. The reality is that there's 7 aspects of government that we have to be able to defend. Who would think that the city of Bismarck would be on equal footing with the city of, say, Botno, right? Very, very different communities, right? Bismarck has a tax base and a resource base to be able to get staff. But from a data standpoint, those 2 communities actually look very, very similar, right? Very, very similar. Now, there's another aspect to this around connection of our systems, and I'll talk to this as I kind of keep going. But we have a connectivity of our systems where one environment absolutely creates a massive risk towards another environment. And what can those connections cause? And I'll talk about that as I keep going. So from an operations standpoint, what we have said and what we've put to our vendors and our partners, our strategic partners, is we said we want to be the most automated security operations center on earth. How many of you would ever thought that would come from government? Right? Let me give you another spin on this. When I talk to our partners and our strategic partners in regards to cybersecurity, one of the things that I keep poking them is, I do not have the time to go as slow as private sector does. Think of that from the perspective of government, right? Everybody thinks of government as this plotting behemoth, but the reality is, right, is every single one of you are at risk because of the environmental choices that we've taken over the last many, many years. All of you have data that you must give us, that you're forced to give us, that we absolutely must defend. We talked about nation-state actors here in the previous conversation. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in the upcoming slides. But the reality is that every attacker that your normal intellectual property organization has, in my old world, right, I worked for Mayo Clinic as an XO, as in the introduction, worked for IBM, et cetera, other organizations like that. Every type of attacker we had there, we have here. University systems, how much drone research gets done in this state? How much oil and gas research gets done in this state, right? This is the 2nd largest energy producing state in America. That's interesting to external attackers. That's very interesting to nation states, especially when you start talking about Grand Sky. And in Grand Sky, we've got drones that are 3 inches wide that are being tested there, and we've got drones that are the size of 727 and everything in between, right? That's a huge, huge capability of interest to external players. See, the other reality we have, right? This is usually everybody's favorite slide. Who doesn't like Terminator versus RoboCop, right? Everybody likes that. But the reality is today's world isn't hundreds and hundreds of IT people or cyber people trying to defend against millions of attacks. What we have, again, in our environment right now, 99.999999% of the attacks that we get are fully handled by artificial intelligence. Today, right now, not tomorrow, not some magical thing in the future, now. the vast majority of the attacks that come against our environment are already being handled by AI. And a huge portion of the attacks that are coming at us are also automated attacks. So those nation-state actors, those organized crime groups, even those individual attackers are using systems that they can simply set and forget to go out and start looking for vulnerabilities. And we have to defend that same way. So not only did we say we must be the most automated environment possible, but we also have to have artificial intelligence to look at the future of attacks, look at how attacks are changing, and how do we respond to them. And we're doing that right now here in the state government. So let's talk about workforce. How many of you have enough people on your cyber team today? All right, now I'm going to test and see who's awake. How many of you do not have, put a hand up, give me a hand if you do not have enough cyber people on your team, right? Almost everybody says we don't have enough staff. How many of you have positions posted right now that you can't fill? There's also lots of hands going up, right? Where is the workforce? It's just not out there, right? As I said, 0% unemployment. When we think about tomorrow's cyber workforce, this is it, right? These two girls, when this picture was taken, they're second graders in Liberty Elementary. These two girls were learning codeforkids.org. They've got BoboBots, they've got Dashbots. They are doing some really fun things like taking that little blue robot that she has here and sled dogging it so that they can take it down to the library, pulling a pizza box so the librarian can put the book on the pizza box and it comes back to them, right? Fun stuff that they're learning. That second grader, they're going to be thinking of things that we haven't even thought of yet, right? They're going to be designing and deploying technologies that we haven't even thought of yet. That is the future of the workforce. So let me ask you right now, name me a job that doesn't use computer technology today. Come on, yell it out. What's that? Plumbing. All right, do they use a POS system? Do they use an inventory system? I bet they do. I bet they do. Maybe an individual single plumber, maybe. But if they're a company, I guarantee you they use an inventory system, right? Heating mechanic, right? Right? Your heating mechanics, your HVAC mechanics, right? I just had one come out and check my house. What did he come out with? He came out with a scan tool. He jacked the scan tool into my furnace, right? People we traditionally don't think of as using technology use it constantly, right? How many of you had your car into a mechanic recently and have seen the kind of computer hardware behind that, right? Right, an ASE technician nowadays has a year of computer technology as part of their work to be able to get certified to work on cars, right? The reality is that I've asked this question in front of a ton of different rooms. I was in Toronto back on August the 23rd of last year. I asked this in front of that room, about 7,000 people there, and one person yelled out, "Professional golfer." And I went, oh crap, I don't golf, I don't know, right? And before I could even get it through my head, somebody over there goes, "What are you talking about? I got an app that measures my backswing." And the other guy in the back goes, "I've got a laser on my club." Right? I mean, the reality is practically every job in today's world, whether you're going to be an engineer or a physician or you're going to work at a restaurant your whole life, any of those jobs use computer technology. So why wouldn't the workforce of tomorrow know that? Right? When's the first time the world was going to end when computers failed? Yeah, millennial bug, right? December 31st, 1999, the world was going to end. Everything was going to stop. It's my favorite episode of Family Guy, right? It's just great. Everything crashes and everybody has to eat Twinkies for 15 years. It's just great. It didn't happen, but 20 years ago, we thought the world was going to end because we didn't have a handle on computer technology. How many states had computer science and cyber science as standards in 1999? 20 years later, how many of them had both of those things as standards? One. This. We're the only state in the nation that has computer science and cyber science as standards for K-12 and integrated to K through PhD. Why? And I'm not standing here saying, look at the awesomeness of North Dakota, we can do it ourselves. What I'm saying is where are the other 49 states? Please catch up. Please get this done too. Because every single parent has the exact same purpose in life, to make sure their child succeeds. How is your child going to succeed? How is the workforce going to succeed if they don't understand computer technology and they don't understand cyber technology, the cyber risk? How many of you guys work in sales? Anybody? Sales folks? Right? How much easier is your life? I see a couple of you guys over here. How much easier is your life if every customer you walk into understands that cybersecurity is a major risk? What's that? You spend the entire time going, hey, did you know you're under attack? Did you know you're under attack? Did you know you're under attack? Right? Right? What if people already understood that? How about all you guys who work in cyber operations? What is the difference to your cyber operations if your staff know not to click on the phishing emails? What does that do to your work, right? What does that change? Makes it vastly easier, right? It makes your life vastly easier. It cuts down on a lot of our external threats. It cuts down a lot of our day-to-day incident problems. The workforce is absolutely huge. This is what we absolutely fundamentally have to change when we look at a vision. When we talk about that go to Mars, our go to Mars statement is every student, every school, cyber educated, kindergarten through PhD. And I don't expect them all to become cyber analysts. I do expect every single one of them will at some point work in technology or with technology. Make them educated. So outcomes, these were the strategies. This is what we've put forth. So I like to pick on myself a little bit, right? So I'm a government guy standing up here, and a lot of people go, yeah, thanks for the political brouhaha. What did you actually get done, right? Who wants to hear what we got done? All right, good. That means I'll keep talking. Otherwise, I was going to just go back to jokes. So from a strategy standpoint, how about this? Empower people, improve lives, inspire success. Senate Bill 2110 signed into law, 47-0 in the Senate, 88-0 in the House. What did it give us? It gave us comprehensive strategic cyber authority for judicial, legislative, executive, higher ed, K-12, cities, and counties. No other state in the nation has this defense strategy capability, period. First legislative session that I had ever worked at, first legislative session that we put in front, this bill in front of them, and we got it approved unanimously. Operations. So we're vastly improving our maturity. We did a baseline of our operational maturity before we started our new initiative. That baseline put us at 1.2 on a 0 to 5 scale. All sorts of things that are in depth on this. You could run on an entire session just on this conversation. But from our operating model components, our overall secure, defend, respond capabilities, as we looked at those capabilities, right, initially, we're 1.2. And I know that immediately makes people's stomach sink a little bit, right? Go, oh, my state was where? Where does that compare to everybody else? Shouldn't everybody be a 4 or a 5, et cetera, et cetera? And maybe they should be, but not necessarily, right? Depends on what you're defending. Again, I believe government has a fundamental moral responsibility to defend our information. So a 1.2 to me is not acceptable for where we want to be. So With the implementation, if I can say that today, implementation of our new tool sets that started on the 1st of July, and our assessments that are going out to every single one of those entities that was approved right here, as those assessments go out, our operational maturity by the time we hit this next session will be closer to 3.7. What does that mean to you as a citizen? That means your data is vastly more secure than what it was only a few months before. It means we have vastly better controls. It means we have a more artificial intelligence machine versus machine capabilities. It means that we can detect breaches vastly faster. It means that we can manage incidents vastly faster. I'll give you an example. I was just having this conversation just a moment ago here during the break. But in my old world, when we had a ransomware attack, when we started at roughly a 1.2, right? We were actually 1.3 is where we were at. When we had a ransomware attack, we ran a command center for almost 6 weeks straight with everybody in the command center to be able to clean up and fix and manage the ransomware attack. By the time we were at the 3.5 range, our ransomware attacks were literally an incident ticket. It was submitted to ServiceNow, that was our product. The ticket went in, the system took it over, and nobody cared because it was no longer a problem. That was the difference in that kind of maturity rating. So we're moving that maturity vastly and very, very quickly. And again, our target here to be at 3.7 is by this upcoming session in January of 2021. So just over a year from now to move that far. So from a workforce standpoint, K-20, every student, every school, cyber educated, kindergarten through PhD. We did it in 11 months. We created a computer science standard that was in existence in other states. 11 states had a computer science standard at that point. We created a cyber science standard. No other state had that. Virginia was the only other one that we found that was even working towards it. We partnered with over 40 different organizations. I see several of you here that were actually part of those organizations. Right? National Guard was a major component for us. U.S. Marines, Microsoft, Palo Alto, the Department of Commerce, Department of Homeland Security, Department of Human Services, Health and Human Services. I can keep on listing these for quite a while. NICERC, NICE, National Institute of Standards and Technology. It's not just all North Dakota companies, right? This is a national effort, bringing over 40 organizations all in the same room. In fact, when we did the meetings, it was about half of this size here. We had a little over 100 people just at those meetings. We put together those standards, we integrated those standards together, we taught over 2,000 teachers to be able to teach their students, the teacher-teacher program, and all of that was done in 11 months' time. Hey, private sector guys, how's that for speed? Absolutely serious when I say I don't have the time to go as slow as the private sector. I'm not picking on the private sector. What I'm saying is that we absolutely must raise to the occasion. We must bring ourselves up to be able to deliver vastly, vastly, vastly better environments than what we've done in the past. What's this do to business from a workforce standpoint? We're creating jobs. We're putting people in the field, right? We are educating your workforce over the long term. I've had companies now give us calls, and one of the companies that we're talking to is based in Denver, right? A city of 3.7 million people. And he's talking to his board of directors, and that board of directors says, why would we go to North Dakota, right? Where's this North Dakota thing, right? Because North Dakota's only got 800,000 people in it. Why would we possibly go there? And the chairman looked at them and said, because 10 years from now, they will have workforce. And that board unanimously said, oh, excellent, let's go. And they're talking now about bringing a site here to the state of North Dakota, right? What's it cost your average incident? 11 grand is the average incident cost. What's your average breach cost? $4 million, right? Lots of awesome numbers that we had this morning. Target, $160+ million, right? What does that do for a business? When you've got companies that are not technology companies, but are differentiating themselves because of technology, right? If you got a company that's in wind power that is differentiating themselves because of their ability to create software, what is that difference to them in how they have a cyber-aware and cyber-secure workforce? That can be a huge, huge difference. So from an economic perspective, this is a huge push that continues to vastly, vastly interest companies to say, how can we be part of that? How about the kids? Our mission for the state of North Dakota, our purpose is empower people, improve lives, and inspire success. This gal, also a second grader at the time, she's got her little robots there, right? And she can do something that I can't. She can put colored lines on a piece of paper in a straight line and make the robot do cool things. I'm colorblind. I have no idea what the robot's supposed to do. But she puts that robot there, and she takes a marker, and she makes these lines. And the robot blinks, and sometimes it spins left, and sometimes it spins right, and sometimes it goes forward. What is she doing? She's programming. Not the way you and I think of it, right? We're not doing Python, we're not doing Perl, et cetera, language. But she's learning to code. She's learning that instructions create action, and then that action gives an output, and that output creates value. And right now, in second grade, she's learning how to do this with these itty-bitty little robots. And she's also working in those same dash bots that we saw with those girls before. She works with the Bobo bots. She works with a whole collection of different robots. And when I go to this girl, and you can only see the Pokemon T-shirt to the boy behind her here, but I asked her, I said, so what if little Johnny here wants to change what your robot is doing, right? She's got her tablet in her hand. She goes, no, he can't. I'm like, great, you got physical security down. Good job. Strategically, whole of government, I mentioned that before, all branches of government. Let me give you a story. Last year, we stood in front of the Senate, and we said, one of the school districts here in the state of North Dakota has been attacked by North Korea. A nation-state actor of North Korea tried to get into a primary school to use their systems. Why? Do you think North Korea gives two craps about what she's doing as a second grader? No. What is our school system connected to? They're connected to StageNet. StageNet has 250,000 people in this state on it. One of the other groups that is on that environment happens to be in uniforms back in the corner, National Guard. In the state of North Dakota, who provides physical ground force defense for the nuclear military bases that sit in Minot and Grand Forks? Hundreds of missiles and a B-52 strategic wing. The National Guard provides that defense. What was North Korea looking for? They were using that girl's type of system, not hers personally, but the little itty-bitty robots that she's learning on to be able to become something in the future, to be able to use that to pivot off of a elementary school network to try to get to the National Guard so that they could attempt to get information on nuclear missiles. Now, does anybody think that a whole of government defense strategy is the right way to go? Right? A completely different way that we have to think because of the accessibility of the pivot plan that attackers can take. I get this all the time. I get, especially from teachers, right? Teachers have a lot to do. Teachers are great people doing great things, but they have a lot to do, and they look at me and they look at her and they go, I'd love to teach this to her, but I also have to teach English. I also have to teach math. I also have to teach social studies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We have to integrate our education plan. We have to teach computer science. We have to make people cyber aware because this isn't the 1600s anymore. Every single job we have is connected. Every single technology we have is connected. When an elementary school becomes a risk vector for a military system, that is not acceptable. And that is why we've taken on a whole of government approach. To a point. So an awesome segue. So I love it when people are asking questions before I even ask. So that's awesome. Please do. What enables North Dakota to be able to do this where other environments can't? So one is StageNet is an advantage in the state of North Dakota, right? The South Dakota environment is not completely the same in this structure, right? So when you're talking K-12, higher ed, cities, counties, comprehensively, it's more similar than most other states. That being said, is there any reason that any other state couldn't take on a similar model? I don't see why, right? It's a factor of political will as much as anything. And as we all know, politics is fun and entertaining, and right? But the reality is, right, is whether you're on the blue side, the red side, yellow, green, other party, right? Whatever that may be, every single one of these groups gets together and says, the safety and the security of our citizen is paramount. Right? And there's no reason that the safety and the security of the citizens' data shouldn't also be paramount. So can this happen in other states? Yeah, absolutely it can. Does it have to happen in different ways? Does it take a different way to get there? Yeah, it depends. You look at a Texas environments as an example. So my peer in Texas, there's 186 people with the same title as I have in Texas. So my scope of authority is vastly different than Todd, who is my direct peer in Texas, because his authority is managed differently. But from a cybersecurity standpoint, it doesn't need to be. We don't need to change operational or application-based models to be able to do basic hygiene, like endpoint management, or to do threat analysis, or threat detection, hunter-killer environments. All that stuff is absolutely plausible, regardless of a state environment. Other questions? Yeah. Oh, sorry. So the ransomware, so the example I was giving, again, is from my former environment where we had already moved that maturity level. Here we are in the process of moving that maturity level. So here within the state, ransomware has hit many, many different organizations, but not within the control of the shared service. So the shared service has had pretty minimal ransomware in comparison to other organizations. Is it common still? Yes, it is still a common issue.
So, relative to the weakest to the strongest,
Yes.
what have you done? Because I tell customers, the weakest lock is one that your perpetrators are going to come in and break into your house. Usually it's the college kids in your dorm room at Friday night with a stack of beer, and nothing else to do. They just want to go play with the grading system. Someone wants to get into the kindergarten network, whatever. What have you done differently to go to those networks that are sitting in the western part of the state where people say, oh yeah, no big deal. It's only 50 people in the whole city, not a big deal. But someone says, I can get into that network, like you said. I now get into the mother network, and I have access to everybody. What have you been doing in those C places that people might have to think twice about?
Yeah, so the reality is that first you have to determine your crown jewels. What are your crown jewels? What are the highest risk areas? Whether that's a data system or whether it's a vulnerability aspect, you have to determine those. And then from that, we basically ring those environments. And then from that ringing then determines where we go. So is it a micro-segmentation aspect? Is it a limited trust aspect? Is it a macro segmentation? All that depends a little bit on what that crown jewel system is and how that's broken apart. But the initial offering is what we're doing out of the gates is we're assessing every single location's cyber situation right now. So we've already sent out the survey model, or CMA survey model, to be able to get out to 30 organizations right now. Yep, so the pilot first. Ultimately, we'll be at over 600 different organizations around the state. And the first is, what do you really have? What's critical going from there? We've also offered tool sets for organizations that don't have them, endpoint protection, data analysis, threat analysis kind of tool sets. Those have been offered. We won't apply a lot of those until the assessments come back. So we're on the operational side, we're still in that earlier stage. Other questions?
From an orchestration standpoint, this challenge, right, your city 20, 7 branches, you have different levels of maturity, you have different tool sets, different compliance regulations. What's the orchestration that you're trying to apply? Is that part of the play here?
Yeah. Yeah. So from a conductor standpoint, it helps to have the strategic authority component out of legislation, because it gives us the ability to be able to say, this is what strategy is, and this is what applies to strategy. And then we have defined separately, this is operations. And from a strategic standpoint, we've said, we're going to set, here's the critical infrastructure types, and with the critical infrastructure types, here are the critical things that have to be done in each of those areas, and then how does it apply to you as an entity? And with that, then we turn that back to those entities. And we start again with a survey. It's a self-assessment. The self-assessment gives us information back, where then we send a team, and that team determines whatever else we need to determine from the point of view of risk vector. From that aspect of risk, then we can say, okay, are you managing your accounts this way? Are you taking away administrative privileges at the local box? Do you have endpoint defense software? Those kind of things, and we kind of cycle through that. Is that getting where you're asking, or am I missing your?
No, you're there. It's just we have so many different entities. You have all
Yes.
branches of government, right?
Yes.
We have thousands of other entities we're trying to deal with, which are all going kind of the same direction, but not necessarily on the same path.
Yes. Yeah, and the reality is, right, is most of the entities actually have been really excited for this. We had a lot of entities that stepped forward to the legislature and said, please help us with this. So they've actually asked for this help. You have a few entities that have said, no, we're super awesome, don't bug us. At the same time, and we go, okay, that's cool, but do the assessment, do the survey, and prove that you're super awesome. Because if they are, we'll do what they're doing, right? I mean, we'll take those best practices regardless of where they come from. I don't care if it's a Fargo or a Botno, that has the ideas, or anybody in between. We want to capture those best practices and move them forward. Other questions? What's that?
A mortician,
Yes.
how would they use IT or
So a mortician.
I'm just throwing it out there.
Okay. So I actually, in my old world, I did this one. So I used to do a process called gowning up, right? And I get in the whole clinical uniform, whether it be nurse or doctor, and I go into the areas and watch. So a mortician is an excellent example. A mortician will bring in the remains, they put them on the table, and suspended over the remains are camera systems and also audio and video systems. So basically, trying to catch me on a job that doesn't use computers, right? But they use a ton of computers because they're documenting all this stuff. They weigh the remains, they part out the remains. If they've got a cancer, if they've got a hematoma, if they've got a myocardial infarction, any of those type of things, all that gets all censored out too. So it all depends on how advanced your mortician is. Maybe they don't. Maybe they like the old school pine box style, but ones that I've worked with, cameras, audio, and a lot of data collection. Are you a mortician? No. Okay. I was gonna say, tell me if I'm crazy. Have you ever seen a professional disco dance instructor that doesn't use YouTube? Groundskeeper. Groundskeepers. So the groundskeepers at my old job used a mapping system on their phone to determine which grounds had been managed, what had been mowed and what had not been mowed, and what had been planted and not planted. This is fun. Throw me another one. What's that? Boxer? I would assume a boxer is watching videos of their own matches. Taxidermist. Ooh, taxidermist. Taxidermist. Taxidermists are going to be using Facebook, right? Most of them are going to be using Facebook. Apparently you have some taxidermists over here and they all say they use computers. That's one I don't deal with much because I usually eat what I hunt, so yeah. Inventory, chemicals, Amazon, you gotta be buying something from Amazon, right? So. And he lasted about 18 minutes. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yep.
So with all this publicity and the things that you're doing here, do you feel that people might want to come hack you guys just for the sake of saying, oh, don't worry about it, I was able to get into North Dakota as well?
We are the second largest energy producing state. We have military bases with nuclear strategic centers. We have one of the largest drone test sites in the world. We have a pair of universities that are research organizations. If I stand on top of the Statue of Liberty screaming how awesome we are, it will not change the amount of attacks we get one damn bit. Because the reality is that everything that we have in this state is just as interesting as everyone else has in their states, right? There are very few states that don't have something that somebody wants. And the reality is are we putting some press out there saying that, hey, we're getting vastly better? Yes, we are. What we really need to think about, right, isn't today's operational attacks, but it's tomorrow's environment. How are we going to defend ourselves tomorrow? So let me give you a twist on this. Grand Farm. How many of you are familiar with Grand Farm? So Grand Farm, right, is a new adventure here in the state of North Dakota. Is building out the first farm that is fully autonomous, 100% people-free. The only human beings that are on that farm are the engineers and the data scientists who are watching the robots do things, right? There's another fully robotic dairy farm that exists here in the state where the cows go in and the robots milk them and all those kind of cool things. Today, those are really cool, cutting-edge technologies. What is that 15 years from now? 15 years from now, that's the way everybody gets food, right? That's the way food is grown, is going to be in those autonomous environments. What happens 15 years from now when we haven't thought about cybersecurity yet? Right? I mean, the head of the NSA gets up in front of Congress and testifies that the only reason that the Chinese haven't shut down all power in America is because we could do the same to them. I mean, is nuclear deterrent really our defense plan in this case? That's not really the way we want to be. And that's not how we expect to be in the future either. So when we talk about agriculture just as one industry of many, many industries, agriculture is going through an immense, incredible transformation, and they're going to look incredibly, incredibly different. I mean, even right now, right? You get in a John Deere 770S combine today, right? You sit in that combine, there's 5 screens up the side. It's telling you how many bushels you're getting live. It's telling you what the water content, moisture content is live. It's telling you what the map overlay is, where all the rest of the tractors are in that field. And I mean, all of this data. And today, right now, when you have that tractor, that big combine, you take the stick, you pull it over, you got a little yellow button on the bottom, you push the little yellow button, then you hit the pedal, push the steering away from you, and then you play cards. Because the tractor's driving itself. That's not tomorrow, that's now, right? I went and picked corn in one last winter.
So to that point, Sean, the state of Nebraska has a cybersecurity summit coming up. Last year, their keynote was an ethical hacker. He was on to tell a story about how they broke into Caterpillar, and for one season, they lowered the dropping point of all the seed by 3 inches. So
Yeah.
the seed went germinate.
Yep.
Next year, they said they raised it by 3 inches, that over-germinated, and they got crops out of it. So it goes to your point, the most basic necessity of growing corn can be affected by the fact I have 5 computers on a tractor. If I infect one of those computers, I affect how much seed I drop. Suddenly, I don't get any crops out. So it was an interesting story, and I don't know if we want to do it here, but to have hackers come in and tell you what they do, because when they scare the shit out of you, it's a compelling story.
That's, you know, that's my old job. There's going to be a conversation that I would absolutely say you should go to here at 4 o'clock. You're on? Talking about the Romanians? 4 o'clock, talking about the Romanians. So if we back up a long time ago, my job with IBM was exactly that, was to go break into places, right? We were hired to go break into DoD contractors and partners, et cetera, for the purposes of determining what vulnerabilities they had. And then another team came behind me and gave them this huge bill to go fix their problems, right? But my job was to make those things happen. You know, 20 years ago, I was getting to the point of generation on power plants, and it was taking me 4 hours. You know, I mean, that was insane, right? Now, the world's vastly, vastly better now, but can they still get to really nasty things? I'll hear about some of that at 4 o'clock. Yeah, 6 hours, okay. I was at a little site, so. Yeah. Any other questions? I think we've got time for 1 or 2 more maybe. Yep.
So we see the threat from the managed service providers, which is what we saw in Texas and Louisiana. I guess, how do you see that threat, especially when they are who we turn to in small state level or county government level for some of these critical IT services, and we have presence within our network in order to keep those applications alive, but they have no contractual obligation to share threat information. How are we supposed to get after that protection?
Yeah, I'll give you an exact example. So in a former world, we had an organ holding center. It's basically a really big refrigerator that's meant to hold parts post-surgery, right? So think of it as it holds a kidney after a transplant while it sits and waits to go to another person. And that system is a smart system. It's got actually a lot of computers in it, multiple machines in it. The vendor that actually ran that environment was based in India, and they would routinely remote into that system to do updates and checks and very normal, on purpose, appropriate type of work. We did not have control over that vendor at all, but a bad actor who came from a country real near India decided they wanted access into our environment. They were able to directly assault the machine that the connector was using to be able to get to us. So they actually used a valid VPN with valid credentials from a valid partner of ours to be able to go through their system to get to us, and then from there attempt to pivot outward into a bunch of our other systems. And those kind of things drive you bat crap crazy, right? Just absolutely nuts in how you try to control those and manage those. One of the things that we did is a part of our MSAs, part of our master service agreements, we have the right to be able to cut any contract with anyone at any point due to their breach. So we changed that said, this is your risk. If you don't defend yourself, we don't do business with you anymore. Now, that's not always an option based on, right? But it put enough fear into organizations that they would routinely allow us to do controls assessment on them and allow us to be able to do security management with them. So we wrote it in as part of the contracts. That was something that very much helped us. And in this particular case, we said, we're done, out. And we went to another vendor literally 24 hours and said, we're gonna hire you to do this support in a short term, and then we did an RFP for a full process later. But we put those kind of controls in place. The other thing that we put into place because of those type of issues is a different model of microsegmentation around platforms that have external accessibility. We had microsegmentation around, clinical equipment, and then it very quickly became, we have to do this around clinical equipment plus the vendor type. So anything that was GE got one group and Panasonic got another group, and. That was extraordinarily helpful in managing that. But it is a painful problem, those third-party vendors. Here in the state of North Dakota, again, this one went public a little while ago. We had the exact same problem. One of our third-party vendors was attacked, was hacked on their side. It did not actually impact any of our data, but they are a partner to us. And thus, you kind of get stuck in this role that you have to go through. And it is complicated, but starting with contracts, thinking about your technical solutions a little differently were helpful to us. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the end game is holding them accountable. We are trying to defend a government, small government entity. They're not required necessarily to provide us the IOCs and the information we need to understand the threat and the risk that local government's operation. Really, that's kind of the crux of the issue is we're all going to have an issue. That's not the problem. The problem is you're not sharing, and you're not helping me understand the risk you're putting me in. I need information. And regardless of the avenues we use to try to get them to share, we did not find any authority that gave us the ability in this scenario. I mean, I could try to work the renegotiation of the contract, but we're talking about right now. The reality was we had to cut, just like you said, work through the problem, and try to do our own analysis.
One of the major advantages of this approach that we have is information in a real term sense. So threat intelligence is one thing, indicators of compromise, indicators of threat, those are all good things to have, but they're very, very practical knowledge of some of the attack types and where they went. I mean, we frankly, before we started having these conversations, we had no ideas what cities were getting attacked. And now we have a vastly better idea. We didn't know what the number of counties were that actually had ransomware. Now we know, right? And it's way, way bigger than anybody would suspect, right? And North Dakota is not different than any other state that I've worked with. Every other state, 80% of their counties are dealing with a problem. I mean, it's a huge, huge percentage out there. When it comes to K-12, there's sites you can go look up on. All of a sudden I lost it. Somebody remembers the site, but there's a K-12 website dedicated to K-12 breaches. And you can go out there and there's just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of schools that have been attacked, and nobody seems to know it in the public environment, and even fewer in the cyber environment because nobody shares this data. So that is one huge lift for us, is that now we know when a county gets hit, we know when a city gets hit, and more often than not, I mean, it's code red virus. How long has that been out? 15 years? You get something like that shows up. Well, we can crush that in 35 seconds flat. And the automated system will even do it. But before, the thing could go rampant, hit 200 machines, and cause havoc all over the place. And so that has been a huge help for us.
Sean, thank you very, very much. We appreciate you coming to educate us here in the state, and more importantly, show us how well we're actually doing here.
We're trying
As
hard.
a token of our appreciation, here is our first official Cybercoin
Ooh, sweet.
conference coin.
I love it.
Let's give it up for Sean
Awesome.
Riley, please.
Thank you. Thank you.
We should have about a 15-minute break here before the next session starts here. There's some refreshments outside. Restrooms are just out around the corner. So we'll see you all back here or in your respective rooms that you're attending. Thank you.